Hey, what is up, folks? It is the Black Rose here, and I have a great one for you today. Who or what is Fallout's mysterious stranger? I've researched this thoroughly, and early on I found a big thing that most fan theorists that have covered this have missed, hence the title. Now let's go over some background. In modern Fallout games, the stranger is a man who shows up sometimes during VATS so long as one has the mysterious stranger perk. His appearance varies game to game, but he is always male. However, the mysterious stranger has actually been part of the Fallout series since the very beginning. In the original two Fallouts, they would appear sometimes during combat, but not in VATS because there was no VATS back then. Also, they weren't necessarily male, they'd spawn as whatever gender the player was. Additionally, they had a random inventory, and they even remained after combat and had a few bleak lines of dialogue. So who is the mysterious stranger? Well, I think the exact vision for who or what they are has actually changed since the Bethesda acquisition. I'm fairly certain that I understand what Black Isle Studios had in mind for this character, but I think Bethesda has expanded upon that. Though I want to be clear that I don't think they've abandoned Scott Benny's original idea, I just think they've added more. The main addition they made is they expanded the mysterious stranger into the Lovecraft paranormal sphere that they added to Fallout. Many fans do make a connection between the stranger and Lovecraft, so if you're in this camp, kudos. However, I don't think Black Isle's vision for the stranger is based in Lovecraft. You folks actually have the wrong offer. I'm convinced that Scott Benny actually took the mysterious stranger from Mark Twain. Very early in my research for this video, I stumbled onto a book that Twain was working on late in his life called The Mysterious Stranger. But unfortunately, he never finished it. He was toying with a few different rough drafts of the story, so I gave one of them a read, and it wasn't long before I was like, yeah, I'm following the right trail here. The story is about a young boy named Theodore who becomes friends with an angel. And this angel constantly intervenes in human affairs in order to influence outcomes. He does this by teleporting, shape-shifting, and even altering time. Furthermore, one version of the story is titled Number 44, The Mysterious Stranger, and what kind of weapon did Bethesda decide to give the stranger? A 44 caliber revolver. Also, descriptions of the mysterious stranger often call them a guardian angel, and Mark Twain's character is an angel. So yeah, this is what we're looking for, folks. I saw a few Reddit forums and some wikis talking about this, but I am surprised to tell you that I have not come across a single YouTube video about the stranger that even mentions Mark Twain. So I guess I struck gold here, but we're not done with this story. In the last chapter, Twain reveals that the whole story has been about skepticism. Some of you might know that Bethesda absolutely loves skepticism, so I'm wondering if this tie to Twain's mysterious stranger is part of what attracted them to the Fallout series so much. The key area that Twain homes in on is the nature of the self and its relation to knowledge. To explain this briefly, skeptics often assert that we cannot perceive of reality without it being filtered by our individual minds. Thus, everything we perceive is subject to the fallibilities of our minds. So, in the last chapter, the angel tells Theodore that the whole story, his whole reality, is just part of his imagination. A dream, if you will, and there seems to be an implication that Theodore has always known this deep down. Thus, everything that the angel did to influence outcomes had just been Theodore subconsciously lucid dreaming. So who is the original Fallout's mysterious stranger? Well, it's us, the players, and the characters we play as. Video games don't exist outside of us playing them, so they might as well be our dreams. And I think Black Isle Studios decided that it would be neat to extend that to player characters, the Vault Dweller and the Chosen One. So, when the mysterious stranger appears in combat, it's really the player character subconsciously lucid dreaming them into existence because they're in danger, so their minds are doing something to protect them. And I believe that's why the stranger's gender is always the same as the players in the first two Fallouts, because they're an extension of the player. Much like what the angel is to Theodore. I highly recommend reading this unfinished work of Mark Twain's. I really love this story. I think it's brilliant that the mysterious stranger is oneself, because for a lot of people, the person we struggle to understand the most, our own most mysterious stranger, is ourselves. Moving on, let's talk about how Bethesda expanded upon Black Isle's mysterious stranger. When Bethesda started making Fallout, they had a tall task in front of them. They had to transform a series that was an old-school isometric CRPG into a modern three-dimensional experience. And they had to do it in ways that remains true to what Fallout was. One thing they did to that end is they found a way to keep the old turn-based combat system alive in a system that suits the new experience perfectly, the VATS mechanic. Which is where the mysterious stranger can appear in modern Fallout games. So how are the mysterious stranger and VATS connected? Could it be something to do with Vault Tech? Honestly, folks, at this point I think that Bethesda simply decided that the VATS mechanic is where the mysterious stranger made the most sense in modern Fallout. Like I said before, VATS is really Bethesda's attempt to preserve the combat experience from the original 2 Fallout games, which the stranger was a part of. So VATS is where he logically fits in from that perspective. Moreover, if they were to try to implement him into regular combat, he'd get annoying after a while. It would be like having a follower that you can't dismiss. You know that feeling of triumph you get when you bring down a tough opponent and they fall perfectly, almost like it's a scene from an action movie? Well, if the stranger were to show up in regular combat, he'd end up ruining a lot of those. By confining the stranger to VATS, he only appears in a select few moments, and it's always meaningful when he does. I do think that in lore, the mysterious stranger exists outside of VATS, because that explains things like Moira Brown's shady hat and the lonesome drifter in New Vegas. But via the player's interaction with modern Fallout games, the stranger only appears in VATS. Also, I think Bethesda may have adapted Black Isle's vision for the stranger into other perks as well, Nerd Rage and Nuclear Anomaly. Remember, Scott Benny seems to have intended the stranger as a conjuration of the player character's mind as a means of defending itself. And what do Nerd Rage and Nuclear Anomaly do? They each do something to aid the player when their health becomes dangerously low. So perhaps Bethesda took this notion of the dreamer's mind aiding the dreamer out of desperation and turned it into these perks as well. I mean, this would be a very clever way to keep the pure concept alive despite the changes they made to the mysterious stranger with the Lovecraft elements. You heard right, it's finally time to talk about H.P. Lovecraft. Many fans have already speculated that the stranger could be tied to the Lovecraft paranormal sphere that Bethesda established in the Fallout universe, and I think that is the case. I believe that Bethesda's mysterious stranger is Nyarlathotep, a shape-shifting god who enjoys meddling with humans to drive them mad. In fact, he often displays himself as a human in order to manipulate humans into doing his bidding. So I think that when Bethesda was laying out the Lovecraft elements they were adding to Fallout, and they examined Scott Benny's vision for the mysterious stranger and saw that this was the perfect opportunity to incorporate Nyarlathotep. I mean, it's especially fitting considering that the mysterious stranger has multiple forms and seems to enjoy confusing humans, such as the Lonesome Drifter, the many fans that wonder who he is, and Nick Valentine. Speaking of Nick, there's a further angle we need to explore here. Valentine is obsessed with the mysterious stranger. Watching him pop into existence and vanish less than a moment later drives Nick crazy. It's the one case he'll never solve. This connection between Nick and the stranger has led to many theories, and there's a popular one that we need to discuss here. Could the mysterious stranger somehow be the original Nick Valentine, as in the pre-war cop that our Synth Nick's mind is based on? I believe this is the case, and there's a few clues we need to examine here. In Vault 114, where the sole survivor first meets Nick Valentine, one can find a copy of Astoundingly Awesome Tales. This particular issue is called The Man Who Could Stop Time, and it grants the player an extra 5 action points. This is a pretty clear innuendo to the stranger, and it's in a place strongly associated with Nick Valentine. Now look at the stranger's outfit in Fallout 3. It looks a whole lot like Nick's apparel in Fallout 4, doesn't it? But if this is indeed a clue, then why doesn't Fallout 4's stranger have the exact same outfit as Nick? Well, because that would be too obvious. And the last clue I'll bring up here is in Fallout 4, and they both carry gray Tortoise cigarettes. Furthermore, one thing I find very captivating about this last clue is overlooking the spot where Nick's fiancée, Jennifer Lands, was killed, there's a billboard for those very same gray Tortoise cigarettes. So, could there be some sort of implication here? Perhaps, and we'll revisit that at the end of the video. So those are the clues, but we need to connect the dots here. How could the original Nick Valentine be the mysterious stranger? Let's start where the original Nick story ends. His fiancée had just been tragically murdered, and the task force to take down Eddie Winter had been disbanded. He was broken, and he wanted justice, but there was nothing he could do. What might a noble policeman do in that situation? Well, someone under those circumstances may take on some more dangerous cases, because death is now not sounding so bad, and they might as well do all the good they can with the life they've got. And what big case, what mysterious organization might Nick have decided to investigate? Dunwich. From information in the games, we can gather that Dunwich started practicing their weird Lovecraftian magics before the bombs fell. And small things like rumors or stirrings very well could have reached the public. I mean, think about when shady organizations have huge PR disasters in the real world. A lot of the time, the public suspects something is up before the big news actually breaks. So perhaps Nick attempted to take down Dunwich, but how could that lead to him being the mysterious stranger? Well, let's review. The original vision for the stranger comes from the angel in Mark Twain's story. Then going into Fallout 3, Bethesda fused that with Lovecraft's Nyarlathotep. They combined these two characters. And there's one power that Twain's angel has that I have not brought up yet. It can possess people. So, I believe that the original Nick Valentine decided to use what was left of his life to investigate Dunwich, and somewhere along the line he touched some sort of magic book or an altar or something and ended up getting possessed by this angel/Nyarlathotep being, who now uses him as the mysterious stranger. I love this theory. It's so fitting because Nick is Bethesda's version of a noir detective, and in classic fiction, the noir detective's greatest enemy is often themselves. So I love how with this theory, Nick's nemesis, the one case he'll never solve, is the real him. It's a brilliant play on classic noir detective anti-heroes like Inspector Morse and Mark Dixon. There is a piece of evidence that suggests that the mysterious stranger existed before the bombs fell. In the opening sequence of Fallout 4, one can find a pack of gray Tortoise cigarettes in the House of Tomorrow. And if interacted with, Nate and Nora will both be confused by their presence there because to their knowledge, neither of them smoke. So what are they doing there? Well, perhaps this is Bethesda leaving us a subtle clue that the mysterious stranger is somewhere nearby, making sure that these events play out the way that he wants. Could be something like making sure the TV is on so that the sole survivor makes it to the vault in time. I mean, that's what the stranger does, he influences outcomes. So maybe he's playing a part in the proceedings here, and that raises the question, how much does the stranger know about what's going to happen and has happened in the Fallout universe, and what other pots does he have his hands in? Now it's time to revisit the billboard. Could Bethesda be trying to imply that the stranger had a role in the death of Jennifer Lands? Well, the Nick Valentine stranger couldn't have because of the timing, but perhaps our angel/Nyarlathotep being used another avatar to make sure Jennifer bit the dust as part of a gradual plan to draw Nick to Dunwich, so that it could ensnare him and make him a new avatar. Heck, maybe it was the stranger that made sure it was Nick's mind that the Institute used to create the Synth Nick. That Nick acknowledges that a policeman seems a strange choice for that experiment. Well, maybe the Institute didn't choose Nick. Perhaps the stranger did something to the other samples or something to make sure it had to be Nick. Though I'm not sure why exactly this angel/Nyarlathotep would want specifically Nick Valentine as an avatar, or why they'd want a synth Nick as well. I suppose maybe Nick's nobility or detective skills make him a valuable asset? This is a bit of a stretch, which is why I'm not sold on this part of the theory. Maybe the billboard is just a subtlety meant to get us to draw the connection between Nick Valentine's life story and the mysterious stranger. Regardless, I thought this part was worth discussing. Also, the Lovecraft aspect of this theory has an interesting implication for us, the players. You see, Nyarlathotep's father is Azathoth, and all of the Lovecraftian universe is essentially Azathoth's dream, which is very similar to Theodore. So, if the Fallout universe is the player's dream, and the mysterious stranger is Nyarlathotep, and when the stranger appears, that's because the player, the dreamer, is conjuring something to protect themselves within the dream, does that make us, the players, Azathoth? It's confusing to think about, but may have truth to it. Some of you might know that there's a very similar concept in Elder Scrolls, which I explored in detail in my video about the 6 walking ways linked in the top right. In Elder Scrolls lore, there's something called the Godhead, and the Elder Scrolls universe is the Godhead's dream. I believe that this Godhead is actually the Elder Scrolls fanbase, and the games are metaphorically our dream. So perhaps we've stumbled upon a very similar concept in Fallout. Maybe Bethesda's idea here is that the Fallout fanbase is collectively Azathoth, and the Fallout games are like our dream. This could be the case, and I think it would be pretty cool. That's it for this one, folks. That's who/what I believe the mysterious stranger is. Thank you so much for watching. Please check out my socials, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a like, and share. I will see you next time.